Some horror films scream to frighten you, but the ones you should fear most never raise their voice at all. When a movie stays quiet, your mind starts doing the screaming for it. No jump scares, no shrieking violins, no blood splattering across the screen, just a slow, patient stillness that follows you long after the credits fade. These films don't attack, they wait. They creep. They settle into the corners of your thoughts and whisper when you're alone, when the room is still, when the silence becomes just a little too heavy. Tonight, we're descending into 15 quiet nightmares, films so calm, so gentle, you won't realize they've broken you until it's already done. Fact 1. Next of Kin, 1982. This is the kind of film that feels like a dream you can't escape, hushed, foggy, and quietly violent. Next of Kin takes place in a remote retirement home where a young woman inherits the property after her mother's death. The halls are too long, the rooms are too quiet, and the staff speaks in vague, unsettling half-truths. Strange entries appear in her mother's old journals, mentions of figures wandering the property at night, of cries in rooms that should be empty, of shadows moving in the periphery of her vision. As the new owner investigates, the film refuses to reveal whether she is uncovering a conspiracy or losing her grip on reality. Every scene feels slightly off-center, like the house itself is tilting. Water drips in patterns that seem intentional, lights flicker, not violently, but with the gentle rhythm of a steady heartbeat, and the residents, frail, silent, watchful, seem to know more than they ever admit. When violence finally arrives, it does so without warning, cutting through the quiet like a blade through thin fabric. But even then, the film remains muted, restrained, as if trying not to wake something sleeping beneath the floors. In Next of Kin, the silence is the threat, and it's been waiting far longer than anyone realizes. Fact 2. Dead of Night, 1974. Grief can hollow a person in ways no ghost ever could. In Dead of Night, a young soldier killed in Vietnam suddenly returns home quiet, gentle, distant, and wrong. The film doesn't treat his return like a miracle, it treats it like the beginning of an unspoken dread. The family barely questions the impossible, they're too relieved to think clearly. But the son's silence is unnerving. He sits motionless for long periods, avoids sunlight, and watches people with a cold, measured patience. Something about him feels absent, as if the boy they loved is still dead, and this version is only wearing his shape. No jump scares, no loud confrontations, just the slow erosion of normal family life. Pets vanish, neighbors become frightened, and the mother, desperate to keep her son close, ignores the signs that something monstrous has slipped into their home under the guise of comfort. The true horror emerges from the film's refusal to answer the question everyone is afraid to ask. If he came back, what else might have come with him? Fact 3. The Little Girl Who Lives Down the Lane, 1976. Not all monsters lurk in shadows. Some live across the street, smile politely, and knock on your door when the sun is still high. The Little Girl Who Lives Down the Lane follows a young girl named Rin, living alone in a quiet seaside town. Her calm demeanor, the stillness of her home, and the soft way she speaks all hide one crucial truth: something terrible has already happened here. The adults who visit her house sense that something is off. They ask questions she dodges with unnatural precision. They linger in doorways, listening to the silence between her answers, and every time they leave, that silence grows heavier. Rin is hiding secrets, dangerous ones, and the film's tension builds not through violence, but through the dread of what might be sitting just outside the frame. One of the most disturbing elements is how ordinary everything feels. The threat comes not from supernatural forces, but from the predatory men who circle her life with quiet persistence. The horror is human, patient, and inevitable. By the end, the film leaves you with a single, chilling realization. Sometimes the scariest thing in the house is the truth no one asks out loud. Fact 4. The Reflecting Skin, 1990. Some films feel cursed the moment they begin. The Reflecting Skin doesn't frighten with ghosts or demons. It frightens with childhood, its beauty, its cruelty, its incomprehensible shadows. Set in a desolate rural landscape drenched in sunlight, the film follows a young boy who begins to believe that the woman living nearby is a vampire. But the horror here is not the supernatural, it's the silence of the adults around him. People disappear, people die, yet no one explains anything to the child at the center of the story. In that vacuum of truth, imagination becomes a blade. The boy fills the silence with monsters because the real world is too complex for him to understand. The film lets this misunderstanding bloom into something devastating, something far more tragic than a creature stalking the night. The bright, open fields feel suffocating. The stillness of the countryside becomes a trap. Every peaceful shot feels tainted by something festering beneath the surface. This is horror born not from darkness, but from too much light, an innocence scorched until it becomes unrecognizable. Fact 5. Messiah of Evil, 1973. Some nightmares drown you slowly, without ever raising their voice. Messiah of Evil unfolds like a forgotten dream dredged from the bottom of the ocean, soft, drifting, almost peaceful, until it isn't. A woman arrives in a remote coastal town searching for her missing father, only to find a community rotting from within. The townspeople speak quietly, move strangely, and stare just a second too long. Their silence is not the calm of ordinary life, it's the numbness of something ancient, hollowing them out. The film's infamous scenes, like the supermarket sequence and the darkened movie theater, are terrifying precisely because nothing loud happens. No screams, no sudden shocks, just the slow, inevitable approach of people who should not be there, moving with eerie calm. The town feels suspended in time, as if waiting for the prophecy of a returning Messiah to be fulfilled. And as if it already has, every shot seems coated in cold moonlight. Every shadow feels occupied. By the final act, the viewer understands this isn't a film about possession or monsters. It's about surrender, the terrifying kind, delivered in whispers. Fact 6. The Other 1972. Some terrors hide behind innocence, others hide inside it. The Other drifts quietly through a rural 1,930 seconds community, following a pair of twin boys whose days are filled with chores, games, and the gentle rhythms of countryside life. But even in the sunniest scenes, there's an uneasy stillness, a feeling that something tender has been twisted into something unknowable. The film never shouts its horror, it lets dread seep through the cracks. A missing object found in a place it never should be, a dead body discovered with no explanation, a smile that lingers the wrong amount of time. The twins engage in a game, a psychic ritual that may be imagination, or may be something worse. The line between make-believe and malice becomes dangerously thin. As accidents multiply, the film keeps its voice low, refusing to sensationalize the tragedy forming at its center. The horror grows not through violence, but through the dawning realization that the truth has been hiding in plain sight, soft-spoken, polite, and devastating. By the end, innocence becomes the most terrifying thing in the world. Fact 7. Images 1972. Reality doesn't always break loudly. Sometimes it fractures in near silence. In Images, a woman named Catherine becomes trapped in a world where hallucination and truth blend so seamlessly that even the viewer can't separate them. The film unfolds like a fever dream whispered into your ear, soft, confusing, intimate, and deeply unsettling. Catherine begins seeing people who aren't there, friends, lovers, strangers. Sometimes they speak, sometimes they watch her in silence, sometimes they die, and return again moments later. There is no dramatic musical cue, no announcement of danger, only a quiet slide into madness that feels terrifyingly plausible. The countryside where she isolates herself is breathtakingly calm. Rolling hills, gentle breezes, a home filled with warm colors, and yet every room feels unsafe because Catherine herself cannot be trusted. The horror is not the visions, it's the uncertainty. Did she harm someone? Did someone harm her? Are the ghosts real? Or are they memories fighting to surface? The film leaves the audience suspended in the same limbo as Catherine, unsure whether they are watching a haunting, a mental collapse, or something far darker, something that thrives in silence. Sometimes the quietest mind is the one screaming the loudest. Fact 8. Burnt offerings 1976. Some houses creak because they are old, others creak because they are hungry. Burnt offerings is a slow, suffocating descent into a home that feeds on the people living inside it. A family moves into a sprawling mansion for the summer, a place too cheap to be real and too quiet to be safe. At first, the house feels serene, peaceful, even, but every room holds a strange tension, as though the walls are listening. The mother becomes obsessed with caring for the house, The father grows increasingly unstable, and the son begins sensing something lurking just beyond the doorways. Yet, nothing overtly supernatural happens. No slamming doors, no levitating furniture, no dramatic confrontations. Instead, the horror unfolds in whispers. A distant sigh, a locked room no one remembers closing, a mirror that catches a figure no one saw pass by. As the house rejuvenates, the family deteriorates. Not violently, but quietly, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. It drains them with the gentleness of a parasite that knows how to keep its host alive just long enough. When the truth finally reveals itself, the silence becomes unbearable. You realize the house was never haunted, it was alive. Fact 9. Picnic at Hanging Rock, 1975. Some films terrify by explaining too much. This one terrifies by explaining nothing at all. Picnic at Hanging Rock begins as a peaceful school outing on a warm summer day. Young girls in white dresses wander through the idyllic Australian countryside, sunlight flickering through the trees. Everything feels gentle, picturesque, perfectly safe. And then, in the quietest moment imaginable, the world cracks. 3 girls and a teacher walk into the rocky formation known as Hanging Rock and simply never come back. No screams, no struggle, no trace. The film doesn't treat the disappearance as a crime. It treats it as a wound in reality. The remaining girls are haunted by the silence left behind, and so is the audience. What happened at the rock is never shown. Instead, the film builds dread through absence, unanswered questions, unfinished sentences, glances that linger too long. Nature itself becomes unsettling, as though the landscape is hiding a secret it will never share. The quiet stretches between characters like a ghost only they can feel. By the time the story ends, nothing is resolved, and that unresolved pain is the horror. Some mysteries don't want answers, they want witnesses. Fact 10. The Innocents, 1961. Some films age, others become more potent with time. The Innocents remains one of the purest, coldest examples of psychological horror ever made. Adapted from Henry James's The Turn of the Screw, it follows a governess caring for 2 angelic children in a vast, echoing estate where every shadow feels intentional. From the very beginning, silence rules the film. The children speak softly, almost too softly. Doors open without sound. Hallways swallow footsteps. The house itself feels suspended, floating somewhere between dream and nightmare. The governess begins seeing figures in the distance. A man standing by the lake, a woman at the window. They do not move, they make no sound. They simply exist, staring back at her as though waiting for acknowledgement. The horror is not whether these ghosts are real, it's the possibility that they might not be. The film never hands you certainty, it hands you doubt, and then watches you crumble beneath it. What makes The Innocents truly terrifying is the innocence surrounding the corruption. The children smile sweetly, speak gently, and yet something in their silence suggests a deeper rot, a shared secret. A pact unspoken. By the end, the quiet becomes unbearable, and the governess's unraveling becomes your own. Horror rarely whispers this effectively. Fact 11. The Night God Screamed, 1971. This is the kind of horror film that feels like waking up in the middle of a nightmare you don't remember entering. The Night God Screamed takes place in a small, seemingly harmless community until a cult arrives and turns quiet spaces into traps. The film follows a woman falsely accused of murder after witnessing a ritualistic killing. She's placed in a house for her own safety, but nothing about the place feels protective. The lights flicker, the hallways stretch into darkness, and every creak carries the weight of something watching. Unlike most cult-themed horrors, this film doesn't show the cult's terror through loud chants or gruesome ceremonies. Instead, the dread seeps in through absence, absent footsteps, absent guards, absent explanations. Every scene feels like a countdown with no numbers. The woman's paranoia grows not because of what she sees, but because of what she doesn't see. Shapes in the corner, figures outside the window, whispers, carried by a wind that shouldn't be blowing at all. The violence, when it comes, is brief and brutal, but the silence that surrounds it is what lingers. It's the kind of film that makes you listen carefully to empty rooms after watching, unsure whether the quiet is comforting or warning you. Fact 12. The Strangeness, 1985. There are films that feel less like stories and more like transmissions, faint signals from a place humans were never meant to enter. The Strangeness is one of them. On the surface, it's a simple tale, A group of workers descends into an abandoned mine to investigate strange reports, but the deeper they go, the more the film abandons logic and slips into something far more primal. The strangest part isn't the creature lurking in the tunnels, though its stop-motion movements and impossible anatomy are unsettling. No, the true horror is the silence of the mine itself. Every corridor feels like a tomb waiting to be sealed. Conversations echo unnaturally. The darkness seems to drink sound instead of returning it. The deeper the group travels, the more the environment feels alive and aware of them. Long stretches pass with nothing but dripping water and hesitant footsteps. No frantic soundtrack, no theatrical panic, just a suffocating quiet that makes the viewer feel trapped beside the characters, breath held, waiting. When the creature finally emerges, it doesn't feel like a monster attack. It feels like an inevitable correction, as if the mine is reclaiming something that wandered too far. And when the film ends, the silence it leaves behind feels heavier than before, as though the tunnels never quite let you leave. Fact 13. Let's Scare Jessica to Death, 1971. Few films capture the fragility of sanity the way Let's Scare Jessica to Death does. From the moment Jessica arrives at a secluded lakeside home after leaving a psychiatric hospital, the film wraps itself in a quiet, dreamlike haze. Conversations drift, thoughts whisper, everything feels slightly misaligned, as if one wrong breath could shatter whatever balance Jessica is clinging to. The horror here is not in what attacks her, but in what might be real. A strange young woman appears at the house, friendly, soft-spoken, but somehow wrong. The locals stare at Jessica with a mixture of pity and suspicion. Footsteps echo in empty rooms. Ripples move across still water with no wind to disturb it. And through all of this, Jessica hears voices, soft ones, calling her name. The brilliance of the film lies in its refusal to confirm anyone's guilt, not the strangers, not the apparition-like woman, not even Jessica herself. The audience becomes trapped inside her mind, unsure whether they're witnessing the supernatural or the steady collapse of a damaged psyche. By the final act, the silence becomes unbearable, the landscape too empty, the faces too unreadable. There is no big confrontation, no explosive reveal, just a quiet descent into a darkness that feels deeply personal. Some nightmares don't shriek, they whisper your name until you answer. Fact 14. Something Evil, 1972. Before The Exorcist, there was this made-for-TV whisper of a film small, unassuming, and vastly more disturbing than anyone expects. Something Evil begins with pastoral calm. A family moves to a peaceful rural farmhouse. The neighbors smile politely, and nothing seems out of the ordinary. But beneath the idyllic surface lies an invisible rot, spreading slowly. Almost politely, a soft humming noise appears at night. Only the mother seems to hear it. A jar of red liquid trembles without anyone touching it. A shadow moves where no person stands. These moments are tiny, almost dismissible, but they chip away at reality with unnerving precision. Spielberg's early direction weaponizes quiet spaces, letting the audience drown in anticipation of something they cannot name. Unlike traditional possession films, Something Evil never fully explains what's happening. That ambiguity is the horror. Is the family being haunted? Is the mother losing her mind? Or has something ancient been awakened by their presence? The film refuses to answer, and that refusal makes it linger like a bruise. You don't walk away from Something Evil with clarity. You walk away haunted by the questions it doesn't let you resolve. Fact 15. The Appointment 1981. There is something uniquely unsettling about a horror film that almost refuses to be a horror film. The Appointment doesn't rush. It doesn't beg for your attention. It simply watches quietly, while the dread beneath its surface thickens like a storm you can sense but cannot prove. The story follows a father who begins feeling a strange pull toward a mysterious force. After a series of visions and unexplainable events surround his daughter, nothing is shown directly, and yet everything feels wrong. The film's power comes from its silence, long pauses, empty rooms, distant sounds that might be wind or might be something else entirely. No monsters appear, yet a presence is unmistakably there, stalking just outside the frame. Even mundane conversations feel haunted, as if the characters themselves know something terrible is inching closer but won't acknowledge it out loud. And then there are the visions, brief, disjointed, impossible to decode, leaving the viewer with the sense that they've witnessed something forbidden. By the time the film reaches its final sequence, the quietness becomes almost suffocating. and the ending feels less like a twist and more like a prophecy that was always waiting. Some films scare you by force. This one scares you by inevitability. Bonus film, The Haunting of Julia, 1977. Some horrors begin with a scream. This one begins with silence, a silence so sharp it splits a life in two. The Haunting of Julia follows a grieving mother trapped in the wake of an unspeakable tragedy. The world around her moves gently, politely, as if afraid to touch the raw wound of her grief. But something else moves with her too quietly, steadily. With the soft persistence of a shadow that refuses to detach, Julia relocates, hoping distance will dull the ache inside her. Instead, she begins noticing small disturbances, objects shifting when she isn't looking, faint sounds drifting through empty rooms, the presence of something standing just out of sight. Each incident is mild, almost dismissible, yet each one tightens a thread tied around her sanity. Neighbors whisper about the history of her new home. A child's laugh echoes where no child lives. Old photographs seem to tilt, as if acknowledging her. The film does not ask whether Julia is being haunted. It asks whether grief itself has opened a door she cannot close. As she digs deeper into the house's past, the truth forms slowly, like a face emerging through fog. The terror isn't loud or violent, it's mournful, intimate, suffocating. It is the horror of a wound that draws something dark toward it, the way a quiet room draws breath. By the time the final scene unfolds, the viewer is left with a chilling question. When sorrow grows deep enough, does it become a haunting of its own? If these quiet nightmares unsettled you, just remember, silence rarely comes alone. Somewhere in the dark, something is always listening. If you want to wander deeper into the shadows with us, follow this channel, leave your mark below, and share the films that whispered to you long after the credits faded. Until the next descent, stay aware, stay awake, and never trust the quiet.